Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna make a little update on my Dendrobium Nobile Orchids, and as we can see, they are blooming, so that's great. But I have reviewed when these orchids were in bloom in previous years. Mind you, some of them, this one and this one, are one of my oldest orchids. This is around 3 years old, in my care at least, so I did have them rebloom quite a few times. And up until now, they've always bloomed in February or March, at the beginning of March. Well, it's April. And this all has to do with me moving to a new climate, a new environment, and I was suspecting that these orchids will suffer because they are the type of orchids which are dependent on the environment and the temperature range in their blooming, and not only in their growth as well. So today we're gonna see how this move affected them, what happened, and just talk a little bit about how they behaved through the move. So first of all, these plants are hardy. You want a hardy orchid, you get a Dendrobium nobile. I think I had more Phalaenopsis die on me than Dendrobium nobiles. Pretty hard to kill. They do, however, require a few things in order to bloom well. But since on the market we do find hybrids, the whole winter rest thing is a little variable. They don't necessarily need such a drastic winter rest to bloom, but I've discovered that the lower temperatures does favor quite the showy blooms. So this year they're looking quite nice, but it's not necessarily as good as other years for some of them. So last year I had them in bloom in February, and in March they already started their new growth. Being that I moved to a much warmer climate with an extended summer, they managed to completely mature a set of canes, and most of them, with the exception of the Aurora, started to develop a second set of canes in the same summer. This had to do, of course, with the quantity of light and the temperatures, but also with the extended period in which warm temperatures were provided. When a Dendrobium nobile has very warm and constant temperatures, it is more prone to create new growth or even keikis. Thank goodness they didn't produce a lot of keikis, rather than flowers. Now I did have a winter, lower temperatures did arrive, and these orchids did bloom. They were prompted by the lower temperatures as expected, but this happened sometime in December. While in my older climate, the lower temperatures started to appear in September, somewhere in the middle, at least the nighttime temperatures. So I am noticing a trend. So as I was saying, the only two orchids which produce two sets of canes are the Akatsuki and the Angel Lycee one. The one that did not produce two sets of canes is the Dendrobium Aurora. This is a taller Dendrobium in comparison with the other two, so it takes longer for it to actually mature some canes, and even though the new canes are not as tall as the older ones, they are still a little bit taller than these guys. But as you can see, it did produce a lot more flowers than the other two, so let's get you in closer and see them better. So this guy is almost in full bloom, but we do have a few more buds waiting to open here. It created blooms wherever it had available eyes on the older canes. These canes are 3 years old or even more. And these are the new canes with the multitude of flowers. And they are quite a lot of flowers. I did not count them, but I think they're in the 30s. So the overall display on the Aurora, which did not produce two sets of canes, is quite showy. It looks nice. Of course, due to stress reasons and all that period in which I could not provide enough hydration, they didn't grow to the full potential, but with nobiles this doesn't really matter. They can bloom on seriously tiny canes. In comparison, this is the Akatsuki. Let's see if I can identify. So these are the first two canes that this orchid produced. And then there are two more. It's this one, as you can see right here, it's a new cane. It did not produce any flowers. And there must be another one. It's down there. But that one did produce a few buds, as you can see, not a whole lot. So this year it's a little bit compromised, but I know next year this guy will definitely bloom. My main concern is that this year I seasoned these guys properly and I managed to induce only one growth during this season. Now most of the work is done for me because they do adapt to the climate, and right now I am trying to maintain such a temperature in my greenhouse as to correspond somewhat with the temperature outside. I don't keep my greenhouse extremely warm in the winter time, just so my orchids feel that it is winter, but I don't go overboard. I don't keep it too cold so that everything that I have is still kind of comfortable. The downside of my procedure is that many orchids grow very slow in the winter time, but since I have a multitude of orchids, the only way to keep everybody in check and happy is to make some compromises, but that's okay. I have such a long summer that it's really not a problem. So let's take a look at the other one, the Angel Lycée. This guy is a little bit more flowery, but again, it produced 2 sets of canes. This is the newest one as far as I can see. You can see it doesn't have as many flowers or as many buds as this one, which again was produced last year, but before this one. Another cane that was produced last year is this one, but it comes from a different division on the plant. And let me get you closer. This division, or actually side of the plant, was not as vigorous as this one. It came from a tinier pseudobulb, so more of a seedling pseudobulb. Thus it's not very long, but both of these canes, this one and the other one, this one in the back, they were produced last year and they're both blooming, however, not quite like the Aurora, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, being that last year I was considering a serious problem with the Nobiles in terms of blooming because of my climate, I'm quite more relieved. Right now I'm hoping they will season themselves and they will only produce 1 set of new growths per year as they are genetically programmed, so hopefully next year things will be a little better. The canes that did not bloom this year will most probably, or most definitely, bloom next year. But you can see how this change in environment and climate and also the stress induced the bad effects that we see on the blooming this year. And some were affected more than others, obviously, even though these orchids were kept in the same climate and treated in the same way, fertilizer-wise and water-wise. Since no individual orchid is identical to the other, we can see the differences. This, however, doesn't mean that the plants are sick. They are looking quite great. Root-wise, they did create a lot of roots and they seem to enjoy the inorganic medium. They're not having difficulties adapting or anything, so things are pretty okay. However, I am seriously considering this year, when I repot them, to add just a little bit of slow-release fertilizer. So far, I am enjoying the results with the catasetums, and I think yesterday I posted an update on the catasetums. I feel that results are starting to show already, and Dendrobium nobiles are indeed heavy feeders during their growing season. So the quantity I will add will definitely not be as big as the catasetums, but a few pebbles here and there. I really hope it will help them out, because as you can see with the Aurora especially, the new canes are 3/4 the length of the older canes. That's not necessarily good. Of course there was the stress, but I think we can do better than that. Leaving all of these things aside though, they are beautiful, aren't they? They are so very fragrant, and there are differences actually in the fragrance. My boyfriend smelled all of them and he feels like the Aurora smells a little bit like watermelon. And I think I kind of see where he comes from. I think it smells like a cocktail of exotic fruit in a way, but the fragrance is pretty watered down, while this guy smells more floral, and of course the Akatsuki smells really similar to hyacinths. So the fragrance was not affected. They are as fragrant as always and beautiful as always. Flowers are really big, particularly on this guy. When I purchased this guy and in previous years, it did not create these flowers. They're quite large. And things can only get better with proper care, so I'm hoping for that. I also want to work a little bit on display. These guys are a little pendant, and as you can see, I have blooms on one side, no blooms on the other. Display can be improved, obviously, and I recently watched a video from MissOrchidGirl. I'll link it down below. He has a really nice strategy of actually tying together pseudobulbs. He's working on a cattleya, but of course this technique can be applied to many orchids. It's one of those ideas that when you see, you think, oh, why didn't I think of that? I seriously want to try it out after these guys are done blooming, but also with other orchids, other cattleyas. I'll make a video separately with my attempt, but if you're interested in what I'm talking about, do check out the description down below. It's a great idea. So the new growth on my Dendrobium nobiles is just starting right now, and many of you on YouTube have already showed your nobiles in full bloom and started their new growth. As you can see, mine are very, very late, and this is all due to the very long, extended and late summer that we have. Honestly, for me, coming from a temperate climate, I felt the autumn temperatures in December. In January and February, it was kind of wintry, let's say, but up until December, it was pretty summery for me, and of course for the orchids, so that's the reason they are starting late. But this also means they are seasoning themselves, and it's quite important. So what I'm gonna do next with these orchids is I'm gonna wait for them to almost completely finish with blooming, time in which the new growths will start to grow and will be on the verge of producing new roots, and then I will definitely repot them. They will go through the gentle repotting, no need to remove all the pieces of the medium, of course. I will add just a tiny little bit of slow release fertilizer and see what the results are next year. And throughout the summer, I'm gonna keep them very, very wet. These guys love water, and they will drink so much water, very similar to Catasetum orchids actually. And you will notice right away when they are dehydrated or when they're thirsty, the canes will shrivel instantly. You're gonna see the difference from today till tomorrow. So don't miss out on watering, otherwise you can have some mangled pseudobulbs or mangled leaves, and that's never nice. Stay on top with watering, with fertilizing, and offer lower temperatures when it's time for them to rest. Alrighty, so if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchids and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Ooh, that was fast. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye! And on the opposite end, we have the Dendrobium thyrsiflorum, which is, again, not a very new orchid in my collection. Never ever managed to bloom it. I am not entirely sure what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying to offer the winter rest-ish kind of thing. This guy, again, produced 2 sets of new growths last year. But yeah, I cannot make this guy bloom, and I don't know if it's because of the size, this guy should be bigger than this, or because there's something wrong. But we'll see. This year, he will not be stressed, he'll get the full summer effect, so we'll see what happens next year. But for now, no. Thyrsiflorum doesn't really like me.